Good morning.
Hello everyone. If you see us shaking slightly, we received this gift of a very fancy sort of a stand for the phone, but it's almost like it has a slight sort of
A gooseneck.
So it
And I
takes a
think
while.
For a while we'll get into the rhythm of the camera.
So sorry about that. Yeah, we're already into the third week of January and things are picking up. It started so rapidly. We've been having people on retreat already, and we have done 2 pottery workshops in the past week. And so we are getting very busy. And when that happens, and you're coming out of a quieter time where you actually really could fit in your meditation, your centering prayer time quite easily, and got into that rhythm, you immediately feel the pressure of continuing to do that and not letting that suffer because of all the daily activities that are picking up. And we've been talking about it the past 2 weeks about especially centering prayer and the formal practice, meditation practice, and maybe just to discuss why it helps with normal life, why it helps you handle life better.
Yeah, because often we have this perception that to be a contemplative, one has to live a life of silence and isolation and total peace, where there aren't all these demands playing into your life and infiltrating your life and upsetting your emotions, in other words, and live an isolated life.
Is it like James Finney says, I could have been...
It would have been easy to be a contemplative if I didn't have my life to live.
Yeah.
That's exactly that.
Yeah.
Often, and I find myself often frustrated because I say I'm so taken up with the pace of everything again that I don't get to live contemplatively. And that's a misconception that I have. And I have to look at that. It's more about, and you touched upon that in the Afrikaans recording as well, it's about a certain inner life, an interiority that is deposited in us, or that is built up through the daily practice, the formal practice. When we sit with a centering prayer, when we sit in meditation, something happens in us, even without us knowing it. There's a deposit, there's a resilience being built up. There is an ability formed to remain centered even amidst big turmoil. That is what is happening in the practice. And when we say that one has to be able to live a contemplative life amid all the other demands and everything, we're not saying that give yourself over to a stressful life or fill your diary with as many things as you possibly can, because you will be able to handle it. It implies that you have to be discerning about your commitments, about the way you live. You have to look at that.
And to what you are realistically able to do.
Yes.
I mean, it also helps then to come from a place of where you can actually say, there are things that I must not take on.
Yes.
And that I can trust that if I... And it's almost like you build in that trust as well with the practice. It's not like it's all coming from me.
Yes.
You are becoming steeped in a feeling of being held.
Yeah.
And it makes you much less vulnerable to crises that will throw you off balance. The crises will come, life will happen, but you are less vulnerable in terms of handling it, in terms of being able to discern. So it just makes you more resilient to life.
Yes, it does.
And I think that's a very important thing. It's almost like storing, like a pantry. That's if you don't do it, and I think that's what happens when you get so busy that you say, oh, you know, I can't give priority to that. And gradually you find that life is getting to you, that you are feeling, like you say, I'm not living a contemplative life, I'm not handling things anymore. But it's because the pantry has become empty.
Yes. It's a matter of constantly filling the well.
Yes, I like the well part more, actually.
Yeah.
Than the pantry.
Because often we live life out of a dry well. Because this interiority that must be our source, that is lacking. So a contemplative life is a life lived amidst people that frustrate you, stressful situations, home appliances that break at the most inconvenient time, illnesses, family crises. So it's living amid all of that. And the beauty is that those challenging situations is actually gift for contemplation. If we live a contemplative life within an ivory tower, where everything is calm and serene and so on, often we don't get to our triggers and the things that we have to look at if we want to grow. In the same way that happens when we get challenged.
I think the misconception often is that if you want to live a contemplative life, you actually have to go somewhere and live in a little place where you don't have contact with anybody except for contact with God, and then you are living like a true contemplative.
Yes.
And that is a misconception, because living alone, living simply, spending a long time in silence often does not necessarily make you contemplative.
Yes. Yes.
It has to be coupled with a practice where you open up to God's action in your life. So that is the core of contemplation.
Yeah.
To be and that's that action and contemplation that Richard Rohr talks about. Is even in contemplation, the action is that you are allowing the time, allowing God, opening up, being available. Those are all actually actions that you are taking. And life, like we always have the quote of Paula Darcy, what's in the way is the way.
No, that is Mary. Mary O'Malley.
Mary O'Malley. What does Paula Darcy also say?
God comes to us disguised as our lives.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So in a very difficult life, it becomes actually cardinal to come from a place where you have this feeling of being held, and you can come into that situation without feeling that you have to be the only solution, it's just you're all alone in this world, handling all these difficult things.
Yeah, returning to what you were saying about what's in the way is the way. This stumbling block is actually the gift that helps you to get to know yourself better. Why does this frustrate me? Why is this an irritation? Why am I so anxious in this situation? And coming from a contemplative stance, we say, what does this want to teach me in terms of my own process? So the problem becomes part of the solution. The thing that I struggle with helps me to get to my own answers. That is the beauty of contemplation. It is working with and steeped in life. That's where it happens. And in that regard, I always think, and I love that quote by James Finley on spiritual direction and spiritual directors, because he says, there is no shortage of spiritual directors in our lives. And I don't think that he says, well, you don't have to get a formal spiritual director because you have other spiritual directors.
Don't kill this income line.
Yeah. That's not what he's saying. It is this balance you have, and we've touched upon that. You have a formal practice and you have an informal practice. The formal practice is extremely important. You have that on a daily basis or on a monthly basis, whether that is contemplation, your sit, but also the talk with your spiritual director. But then on an informal basis, James Finley says there's no shortage of spiritual directors in our lives. For our spiritual directors are the people we live with. They place upon us unbearable burdens. They give us unexplainable gifts. They grind us like wheat. It is so beautiful. We don't want to be challenged in that way, but we grow by being challenged that way.
And by being aware that it can be a growth path. It's not just an irritation. It's not just another problem, another crisis. What can I do with this? How can this become harvest?
Yes. And that does not imply that if you're in a terrible situation and working under a tyrant of a boss, that you have to stick it out because he is your spiritual director in this situation. Sometimes through a process of discernment you say, no, I'm leaving this situation. So that's not what James is saying. But within our families, within our really intimate family members, that's where we find the spiritual directors as well. So
everything is actually showing us the way, helping us to grow if we allow it.
Yes. So it helps us to look at our own challenges, and when things break down, not to break down in the process as well. So thank you for the feedback about your own practices and your journey with a meditation and so on. We found that very interesting, and thank you for being part of the conversation.
Have a lovely week, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.